Diane, and thank you for joining us at a ridiculous time from the US. So Diane is the director of Source, which is part of Additional Ventures, this amazing foundation that's been set up in America, which is a not-for-profit that's working. Really, its ultimate goal is to cure what we call single ventricle congenital heart disease, or things that lead to people needing to have a Fontan circulation through strategic investment and really mind-blowing research. And so Source is something that Diane is leading, which brings together more than 10,000 people and their data to sort of accelerate progress. So I'll hand over to you now, Diane, to tell everybody a little bit more about that.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and thanks for having me. And it's not really a ridiculous hour, but it's not the usual hour that I present on webinars, but it is wonderful to be here. I am going to try to share my slides. So I am Diane Pickles. I have worked at Additional Ventures for about 5 years. I came here after a career in public policy advocacy, so not research, and made kind of a radical career shift a couple of years ago. But I had been very active as a volunteer in the single ventricle space for many years. As I have an adult son with single ventricle, I have a 31-year-old son with hypoplastic left heart syndrome. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about Additional Ventures. As Rachel said, we are a nonprofit research foundation founded in 2020. And our mission at Additional Ventures is to cure single ventricle heart disease through transformative research and strategic investments that revolutionize treatment and care. And what we mean when we talk about curing single ventricle heart disease is developing therapeutics or devices or a combination of the two, likely some combination of the two, that would enable a normal longevity and quality of life for all single ventricle heart disease patients. So those who are alive today, living with the disease, as well as those to come in the future. Since our founding in 2020, our team has grown. We like to tell kind of a funny story that our founders, Aaron Hoffman and Mike Schreffer, who you heard Rachel speak about, I don't think they ever envisioned having staff at Additional Ventures, and we've grown to, as you can see, quite a few. And we continue to grow based on the research programs that we set up and the needs as they evolve. We are a mostly scientific team, as you can see, a lot of PhD scientists. And I'll give you just a quick overview of some of the programming that we have underway and that we've put in place since 2020. As Rachel was talking about, prior to the foundation launching, Mike and Aaron founders brought together a really diverse and incredibly smart group of individuals, experts in the single ventricle space. They worked with a consultant through the Milken Foundation to really do a thorough landscape analysis to build a research roadmap. And really the roadmap was about looking at what did we currently know about single ventricle? What did we not know? Where were the gaps? And what did we need to do? And what did we need to figure out in order to get to curative solutions? And the research roadmap that came out of that process, and then they launched the foundation shortly thereafter, focused on these 4 categories: origins, outcomes, care, and cures. So figuring out what causes single ventricle, looking at the many outcomes and the complications and comorbidities that go along with single ventricle heart disease, establishing better care models, and then really developing innovative treatments and therapies to really cure the disease. This is a snapshot of all of the different programs that we have in place, and I will tell you about my program in a few minutes, Single Ventricle Source, but I'll just tell you a little bit about each of the various programs that we have. So Single Ventricle Research Fund, SVRF, as we like to call it, is kind of our flagship research award program. This is an annual award program that supports foundational studies that are really, these research initiatives are really aimed at understanding and improving the outcomes. So those various complications and comorbidities, things like liver disease, arrhythmia, PLE, plastic bronchitis, all the various complications that come along with single ventricle. And you can see these are 3-year awards for up to $6,000 that go to researchers. The Collaborative Sciences Award is a new award that we launched about a year ago. This is a collaborative award with the American Heart Association. And this is multidisciplinary teams that work to get research teams that come together from different labs and work together, again, looking at some of the many complications and comorbidities related with single ventricle. Our expansion award is kind of a small but mighty award program, a $50,000 kind of boost to kind of get a program, give it sort of an extra shot in the arm, if you will, of funding, to add on funding for sometimes to sort of get them to that next phase of research. Sometimes it's to add sort of new equipment that's essential for their lab. It can be a whole host of things. It's a small award, but we've seen some really incredible outcomes from that. And our newest award program is the Translation Accelerators. We literally just launched this. This is really about helping get therapeutics and devices from the bench to the bedside. So to really get things into clinical practice, there is what we often talk about as the valley of death. It takes a lot of money and a lot of time to get things to really be implemented and really get them to patients. And this is an award program that's really designed at helping researchers overcome that that early valley of death in translational research by providing funding and expertise. We have provided some for-profit investments. So we do that. Those are what we call Series C investments. So those are for some companies that are further along in their evolution. So we're not like a first investment, but we come along later on, and we've invested in a couple of different companies, one of which actually had an FDA approval last year, which was incredibly exciting. And then my program, Single Ventricle Source, which I'll tell you about shortly. And then every other year, we host a wonderful conference for single ventricle researchers called the Single Ventricle Investigators meeting. So that's just a quick overview of some of our many, many programs. So just a quick snapshot of our impact since founding in 2020. We've invested over $100 million into single ventricle research. That's more than 260 grants that have been awarded. One of the exciting outcomes is that there's been more than 140 peer-reviewed publications that have resulted from those research projects. We've funded 32 early career investigators. So one of the things that we've been really committed to is helping young investigators, bring them into the single ventricle space, get them excited about single ventricle research, give them that support, and then hopefully keep them in the single ventricle research space. As a result of the funding that we've provided to researchers, they've been able to bring in more than $107 million in follow-on funding, so additional funding that they've been able to leverage because we've invested in them. 24 biomarkers and therapeutic targets have been identified, 10 startups have been funded, and as I said earlier, 1 FDA approval, which was really exciting for a stent that can be that grows with the patient, called the Minima stent. And one of the things that's really exciting is that, we're never science isn't static, we're not static. And we've learned so much in just the 5 years since we founded Additional Ventures, that we are now in the process of updating our research roadmap. And this is really reflective of 2 things, both what we've learned, the many things we've learned through our research, but also a reflection of, how multifaceted single ventricle really is as a disease. I loved Rachel's analysis of calling this, single ventricle patients are really snowflakes, because this is even within, a particular diagnosis such as hypoplastic left heart syndrome, like my son has. No two HLHS patients look the same. And there's so much complexity and diversity within the different diagnoses and across outcomes. So we know that certainly some outcomes, good or bad, can be attributed to surgical course, pre-op care, post-op care, et cetera. but two patients can also have the same care and the same sort of post-op outcomes and end up in different situations in terms of long-term outcomes and morbidity and complications. So it's a very complicated picture. So this is our updated roadmap, which is coming soon. We have two main pillars. One is to build a pump, and the second is to really address the many complications, what we call outcomes of single ventricle. So in terms of building a pump, what we're really talking about here is literally building a pump that would replace the missing ventricle. And so because we don't have this subpulmonary pump, blood, as you know, flows passively back to the lungs. And so this creates chronically elevated pressures and a lot of long-term outcomes for liver and other organs in the body. And so if we could literally add back in a pump, we could really prevent some of those chronic conditions that result from that anatomy. And this pump might be biological or it could be mechanical. On the second pillar is really looking at outcomes. And this is really looking at all the different complications that happen in these different organ systems in the body as a result of single ventricle. And what we're really talking about here is finding ways to prevent or reverse those complications. So, really making it such that single ventricle patients aren't just able to survive, but really are able to thrive and really live well. And so this is really being able to develop risk prevention models, risk prediction models, and really having treatments and interventions available for patients. Kind of as a through line through all of this is pathophysiology. So this is about understanding the genetics and the biology of single ventricle. And this is where our program, the program that I get to direct, Single Ventricle Source, comes in. If we can understand the genetics, what causes single ventricle, and understand how single ventricle really affects the body, all the biology of that, that is essential knowledge for us to be able to work in these other areas. So let me tell you about Single Ventricle Source. We launched Source in 2024. It is an IRB approved study to uncover the causes of single ventricle heart defects, as well as any genetic underpinnings of the many complications that go along with single ventricle. And our goal is to catalyze the discovery of new customized treatments for single ventricle and maybe even cures for these patients. And how we plan to do that is by building the world's largest genetic and clinical data set of single ventricle patients and their immediate family members. So our goal is at least 5,000 patients, as well as 5,000 family members. And then making the de-identified data available at no cost to all researchers worldwide. And when I say de-identified data, what I mean by that is we will remove any personally identifiable information, name, date of birth, where participants live, anything that could identify a participant will be removed from the data set before it is shared with researchers. And we're doing all of this so that we can enable discoveries that will provide that clear understanding of the genetics and biology of single ventricle heart defects. So what causes the disease and how does it impact the body? And why that's important is because if we can understand the genetics and biology, it would allow us to develop new treatments that are truly customized to patients, to their specific genetics and biology. We'd be able to predict who is at risk for certain complications, and then have the treatments and interventions available to either prevent those complications before they occur or to treat them when they do occur. And as I said, we might even be able to develop cures for single ventricle. So in terms of current eligibility, who is eligible to enroll in Single Ventricle Source? Right now, we are US based. That could change, and that's really just driven by the challenges of the various regulatory issues in different countries and moving samples internationally. But I anticipate that this could change. But right now we're US based. So individuals living with single ventricle heart defects at any age and any stage, including post-transplant, are eligible to enroll in Source. Their biological parents and siblings are eligible to enroll, and any adult patients who have biological children, those children can also be enrolled in Source. And the reason we're looking at families and not just patients is because we can learn a lot more and learn it a lot faster if we study family cohorts. I want to say just a couple ways SOURCE is unique. SOURCE is not really one study. It's actually many, many studies. So we're building this massive data set, and then we're going to be making it available, as I said, free of charge to as many researchers worldwide as possible to drive as much research as we possibly can. And so when families participate or patients participate in SOURCE, they're not really joining one study. They're actually fueling many studies. The de-identified data, as I said, will be open to all researchers. We're really committed to a broadly accessible framework. We want to fuel as much research as possible, as quickly as possible. We also feel very strongly that it's important to honor the generous donation of data and genetics by patients and families by fueling research very quickly. So the data will be available to all researchers, no matter what institution they work for. It will be free to use, there'll be no cost, and it will be available through a very simple application process. We'll make sure they are who they say they are, that they are using the data for, good ethical uses, and we will approve them then for use of the data set. One thing that's really exciting about SOURCE is that we are not the first study, certainly, to look at single ventricle and genetics. And we know that. And we have the benefit of kind of standing on the shoulders of all those who have come before us. And so we are really actively seeking out other studies to collaborate and really pool our data together. So we're seeking out other studies that have either already collected DNA samples from single ventricle patients and families, or planning to do that in the future. We will pay to sequence that data for them. Whole genome sequencing is the process we are using. It's not inexpensive to do that. We'll then return the sequence data to those institutions for their research, and we'll ingest the sequence data into the SOURCE data set. This is really beneficial because we can obviously grow the data set larger than we would otherwise be able to do, and do that faster. We're providing valuable financial support to these other studies that are really important studies. And we're also adding value to the data that's donated by patients and families to really fully leverage that contribution to the greatest extent possible. And so I just want to mention before I wrap up, while we're only enrolling patients and families from the United States, you can join SOURCE as an information-only participant by going to svsource.org. And when you do that, we will keep you informed of the research that's underway. So you'll get study updates from us. So if you're interested in doing that, please feel free to check out svsource.org, and we will keep you updated on the study as we go. I thought you all just might be really interested. One more quick thing I wanted to mention that we did last year was a report on the economic burden of complex congenital heart disease. So we really did a study, a deep dive in looking at the economic burden of these diseases on patients and families and on the US economy. And we were thrilled to have the data ultimately published in the Cardiology in the Young. And what I think is so important about this, and why I wanted to mention it, is that Additional Ventures is really we embarked on this because we recognize that families and patients are paying such an incredible price, and there's so much burden on them, and there's not enough research happening, and there's not nearly enough awareness of the burden. These are just a couple quick data points from the study. You can see the average, and again, this is just an average annual cost per patient is $50,000. Families and patients pay nearly half of that out of pocket. And within just the first 5 years of life, families are responsible for approximately $190,000 US dollars in out-of-pocket costs. And forgive me, I did not think to equate that into international dollars, but it's a lot. And we then took that data and we compared it to two very common cardiovascular diseases that are very well funded by our national institutes of health, that are frequently talked about and really well known. And what we found is that complex CHDs are disproportionately expensive. Despite being rare diseases, they're actually incredibly expensive. And actually, the lifetime costs are way more expensive than these common cardiac diseases. What we did with this data, what we've just done with this data, is we've developed a resource for families we knew that this data, we couldn't just have this data, have it out there and not give families something they can do about it. And so we put together a resource. We started it with this kind of open letter from me, talking about my family's experience, trying to normalize the economic burden. And then we provided some resources in terms of who they can talk to for financial support in their cardiac centers, how to go about looking into some financial supports that may exist, and we're releasing that this week, I believe, as a blog post, and really pushing that out to the patient and family community. So I just wanted to give you a sense of some of the other things that we are doing in the patient and family space. I just want to say, you might be wondering, have we funded anyone in Australia, New Zealand? And indeed, we have. So I did a little dive just to see what researchers we may have funded in your space. And you can see Dr. Cordina is one of them, one of our early expansion award winners, awardees rather. And it's been a pleasure to fund both of these researchers. So I just wanted to mention that. So thank you very much. You can certainly reach out to me at any time. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I will stop sharing and turn it back to Dr. Cordina.
Thanks so much, Diane, for all your work in the space. On the financial aspects, it's in Australia, we have a different healthcare system to you, and we have a universal healthcare system. But still, there are so many out-of-pocket expenses for families, and all the things like the missed days from work for parents and traveling, and it's still a really huge issue. And I don't think we've got all the answers here either for that.
No.
We're running slightly over time, but I hope you don't mind. I'd like to ask you a question that
Sure.
crosses my mind a lot for a lot of the people I work with too. I admire so much those of you who are personally affected and then continue to work in this space as well. That must be pretty tough sometimes. I was just wondering if you had any words of wisdom for other people that might be in that situation and how you balance those.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I think about it a lot actually, and I feel very privileged and honored to be here. I feel like my previous career path was not a straight linear path to get here, and yet this job is such a perfect fit of all of my professional skill sets and my personal passion. So it feels right to be here. And there are days when it is hard, and it's also incredibly hopeful for me because when I hear about the research that's underway, it fills me with great hope. And so that is the upside of working in this space, is that yes, the reality is overwhelming sometimes, and yet hearing about the research makes me feel tremendously hopeful. I do believe we will make tremendous advancements. I don't know that they'll be in my son's lifetime, but I do believe they'll be not that far from now. And yet I also know, and I've sort of been open and honest with people about this, that there may come a day when I can't do this job, when, Jake gets sick and the burden becomes too heavy. And I feel like I'll know when that happens. But for now, it feels like this is where I'm meant to be. So yeah, I take it a day at a time.
Well, thank you for pouring your passion into this work. And I also believe it's going to make a huge difference. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I'm sorry I took you over time by a bit. Thank you.
Sweet dreams. Go to bed soon.